All right. We have hit the airwaves, gentlemen. Got Joe's Geek Show in the chat saying, "What's up?" Not much, man. Sipping on some coffee. It's chilly out where I'm at. I don't know about these two guys, but
What's up, Joe? Oh, we're in Ontario. Don't talk to me about chili. No,
I know.
actually, and he's in Alberta. It's probably colder there.
It's finally it was freezing. It's warmed up here. It's nice. And well, speaking of places, Joe's in Japan. So
whoa, what's Joe doing in Japan? He just moved there.
He moved there
from Alaska.
Yeah, right.
He moved from Alaska to Japan. Can you believe that?
That's an interesting change from, hey, there's nobody around me, to I can't breathe. Wow.
From what I understand, Joey's in a little bit more rural of a Japan, but not
which means it's like the size of an average city.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Konnichiwa, Joe. What's up, brother?
I think he was telling me that he's I think, and he's probably going to correct me if I'm wrong. I think he said he's about an hour outside of Misawa. Like that's the largest city near him or something like that. Okay. I'm not too sure though. I could totally be butchering it, in which case, Joey, please correct my ignorance.
Yes. Some comments.
So I'm going to start off this stream by saying that I'm highly disappointed in Boom specifically. This guy, I literally thought to myself, should I wear a Dungeons & Dragons t-shirt? Should I change into something more street level? Because if anybody always accessorizes for the stream, it's Boom. And literally the furthest from a street level, see what I'm saying? The furthest from a street level character is Superman.
But I can tie it in though. I can make that work. Well, I can.
You know what? I'll bet you can.
Well, I can wear some Black Widow. I got some Black Widow cap here.
There we go. I tried to wear my cap hat, but the problem with being huge is that nothing fits you. So.
Yeah, I had to go totally thematic. Got the thumbnail. Got the Daredevil shirt. We're going all in on this one.
Yeah, no.
Bill, Joe says, "What's up?" And he said Hachinohe is the bigger city, and they're in Misawa.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm super. And I've told this to Joey too. I'm so jealous of him, man. Like he just went on like a cultural tour a couple days ago, maybe a week ago now, and I was like, I wish I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spiritually, Japan is the motherland for a lot of us.
Yeah. It's man, I have all these aspirations of like visiting a bunch of like my internet friends once the apocalypse is over. And Joey and I keep talking about it as an excuse to go to like a Tokyo Comic-Con or something like that.
That'd be sick.
For sure.
I think we need some more. I think we need some more idealism in the world, quite frankly. And I'll just start off my quick comment before you introduce the topic by saying that I think we need more idealism in the world. I think we got too many people thinking they're street smart, doing things their own way, and I think too many people are turning their think that their vices are virtues. And I'll just leave it at that.
There we go, waxing some philosophical, my guy. All right. Well,
how's my stream? Do I look okay, or am I blurry?
You're good, man. Boom. I know. Okay. Boom just got kabooted out of here.
He just mic dropped.
Yeah, he's like, let me hit you with some philosophy, and I'm out. Well,
I'm here for you, man.
I appreciate it, Bill. I really do. God, reliable friends these days. Well, while we're waiting for ComicBoom to figure out his technology, I will intro us into the show. Hey guys, welcome to the 61st episode of Let's Talk Comics, where myself and another co-host in the comics community discuss one of the many facets of the storytelling medium that is comics, whether it be stories, creators, concepts, adaptations. We hit it all this week. We are joined by special guest Professor Bill from Comic Book University. My man, it's good to have you on.
You too. Boom should be back soon, I'm sure.
Oh, speak of the devil.
I told you. See?
There he is. You came in just in time for your introduction. It is uncanny.
Yeah, I know.
He boom tubed in.
And yes, he did boom tube in.
Very non street level, but perfect for Comic Boom.
It is. You should make that into a shirt. And apropos of my usual partner in crime rejoining us, we are also joined by the Canadian Cape Crusader, the comic book cultist himself, Comic Boom, my man.
Good to be here.
All right. So with the introductions out of the way, today we're going to be discussing heroic idealism in street level heroes and how perhaps it might be a little bit more draining for heroes that are on the street to maintain such levels of idealism. And we can preface this by referencing Comic Boom's Superman shirt in the fact that I think Superman's abilities, his atmosphere makes it a little bit easier for him to maintain ideals and to operate based off of these very sort of elevated and almost unrealistic ideals. Whereas when you get into characters like Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Batman, Nightwing, Punisher for that matter, these are characters that have to make some pretty morally and even ethically gray choices in order to meet their ends. And I figured this was a really interesting conversation because Boom and I have had a discussion on measuring the sort of morality of God level characters, but we haven't gotten down to the streets. And I figured Professor Bill would be a really, really great addition to this conversation. And as I continue,
he's just like, you know what? Fine, I'm leaving.
But with that being said, I'm curious, Bill, do you agree with my sentiment? Do you think that being on the street forces some of these characters to make some sort of moral compromises in order to get the job done? And why do you think?
Sorry. Being on the streets, no. But being limited in your powers, yes. See,
okay.
The reference I believe that you were inferring to Superman is that why is a lot of people say that Superman isn't realistic. Cute. Meanwhile, a guy who flies around in a suit of armor somehow is. Meanwhile, who's more human? Tony Stark, the actual human, not realistically, not too different from Lex Luthor. You know what I'm saying? Except he doesn't show his face as much. You know what I'm saying? He's got a little more hair. But aside from that, here's this guy who's literally in an ivory tower. It's not ivory colored, but it might as well be. Always, but like somehow he's able to rebuild these towers like that. Avengers Tower, Stark Tower, Stark International. He's got buildings all over the place, and he deigns to look down upon humans and decide for us what is and isn't right. This guy thinks he's a god. He's a narcissist beyond narcissists. I question who's got a bigger head, him or Lex Luthor, right? And what is the character that Superman fights the most? It would be Lex Luthor. He would I don't know that Superman would despise, but he would hate Tony Stark. And why? Because as ultimately powerful as Superman is, he works in the Daily Planet. He works not just with other humans, regular basic humans, making like how many times does Batman make fun of Superman when it, like, you know, I accidentally broke this or my cousin accidentally broke that. Don't worry, we'll fix it. Like, yeah, sure, on a reporter's salary. You know, say like it's one of the best lines ever, and it makes sense. So Superman, while he is not street level powers, he does have his ears on the street, just like most of the actual street level heroes. But Superman doesn't have to compromise as his morals nearly as much because he doesn't have to. He can be everywhere at once or multiple places at once. He doesn't have to worry about being shot and things like that. And he doesn't have to, you know, worry about, am I strong enough to stop this thing from happening? But he's still there. He's with us. He hears, he reports on us, you know? So there's that.
Yeah. I mean, you make an interesting point. Boom. Basically what I had asked was whether or not you sort of agree with the notion that I presented in this conversation that it seems street level characters have to compromise morality or ethics, or even sort of let their idealism depreciate in order to get the job done. And Bill just finished answering, you know, in his perspective. What are you thinking?
Well, I don't quite know if I'd put it that way. I would say this, that there's always that line between. I think a lot of street level heroes start off as idealistic as Superman. The
I agree.
difference is that what happens is, and I wish that they would write Superman and Wonder Woman more like this, because I think they're too idealistic, is that every virtue that Daredevil has, that Jessica Jones has, that Tony Stark has, every one of their virtues, if you take it to the extreme, becomes their vice. The very thing that makes them heroic can also be the greatest bane of their existence. Because if you take, for example, extreme loyalty, loyalty is a virtue. Extreme loyalty can make you sacrifice friends and lose friendships, putting one over the other. If too much courage can lead to recklessness. Too much commitment to honesty, to truth, like Wonder Woman, can lead you to say hurtful things to people. You know, the truth doesn't always set you free. The truth can be hurtful. It's the line. It's street level characters take their virtues and they take them to the extreme sometimes because they try almost too hard. Idealistic characters seem to be able to resist going to the extreme of the virtues because it's almost like a political spectrum, you know, and I think that's what's happening to the world today. I think everyone has their virtue, but everyone's going to the extreme, and all we are seeing is the vices.
So the one thing that I think is, something that I think is worth discussing, though, is that there's a level of pragmatism that I think heroes on the street level heroes, those that are not capable of doing these sort of godly feats, is that it forces them to reconsider why and how they're doing what they're doing, right? I mean, you have characters like Superman who can pretty much do anything. You know, his ideals really almost never have to be compromised, except maybe if he's facing a force so overwhelmingly powerful, maybe akin to Darkseid and his legions. But even then, a little bit less so because of his capabilities. But, you know, when you get down to characters with no powers, or even sort of powers of a lesser magnitude, the likes of, you know, Matt Murdock, Jessica Jones, even Iron Fist, and a number of other DC characters, Green Arrow. I think Batman, to a lesser degree, I think he's definitely maintained a level of idealism, although it's fueled by something much darker. But all of these characters, you know, they are essentially humans. They interact their entire lives with humans. Their suffering, for the most part, have all come at the hands of humans. So I think that it forces them to reckon with that a little bit. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Go ahead, Boom.
Well, I think that those things that the characters have to reckon them with, the characters have to be compelling. And there's got to be something compelling about it. And I would draw the distinction between a character that's too idealistic can be accused of boring, but it's not their niceness that makes them boring. It's their lack of compelling. You have to have something compelling about your character. And whereas if you're a street level character, it's a fine line. You can have a lot of vices, but you don't want to come across like a jerk. You don't want to be hated. It's a fine line. A street level character has to be able to create empathy. You take a character like Tony Soprano, right? This guy's a murderous bastard, yet you empathize with him because even in the craziness of his mafia, there's things that we can relate to. We got to be able to empathize with the character. And I think that's possible with both idealistic and street level characters, but street level characters, they play both sides of the fence more often, and they seem more compelling to us. It's the compelling nature of the characters always keeping us on our toes and being unpredictable, as opposed to the greater predictability of Superman, for example.
You make a good point, Bill. What do you think?
I think that maybe, in my opinion, would it be easier to define what a street level character actually is from all of our perspectives?
Yeah, so the parameters that I was kind of setting up in my head was a character that not only, so I guess from a sort of existential standpoint, I thought of characters that are impacted and dwell within societies of humanity, right? Their lives are impacted from pretty much every aspect, from their what's the word I'm looking for? How they've been raised, how they live, what has impacted them throughout their lives. They're also typically, with a few exceptions, characters that don't have essentially godlike powers for the most part. Again, there are exceptions, but you have characters again like Daredevil, Jessica Jones, who are, a little bit more capable than the average bear, but they're not going to be able to, stop an alien invasion. They are overwhelmable. They are fallible in a physically capable sense. And I don't know, I feel like I'm not wording myself the best way possible, but I guess I'll let you guys go, and maybe I'll be able to wrap around a way to explain myself a little bit better.
You said that in most cases, street level characters don't have godlike or cosmic powers. What would be an example of someone who would?
Well, not necessarily cosmic. It's just like I would say proportionally overwhelming powers. Like Luke Cage is almost unstoppable. Like he's a incredibly powerful. He's impervious to most types of physical force. I think he has to compromise primarily due to his upbringing and the sort of urban cultural impacts of how he grew up. So, but his powers being a small exception. Although I think that in many ways, this idea that, his intuition with humanity, his interaction with humanity being so intimate, I do think it does also make him compromise at times, although to lesser degrees. That's kind of where I'm coming at it from.
Luke Cage is a great example. He was one that I was going to use where I feel like he crossed over. When Luke Cage first started out, he was able to lift approximately 5 tons, which is, ridiculously powerful, but it is what it is. It's not like today where he can lift on the average of 50 tons. Also, his skin was unbreakable, but everything underneath was not the same. You could actually still break his bones. Nowadays, he's at the point where he could take a punch by the Juggernaut and the Thing and just, get back up. And it's like, yeah, come on. And it's like, okay, that he's no longer street level, in my opinion. So when they did him in Netflix series, I knew they were going to have to, weaken him. They were going to have to nerf him, as we say in the gaming world a lot. They had to nerf him big time because in the comic books, he's not even remotely close to street level anymore. So yeah, Spider-Man is somebody that, much like Spider-Man goes between the Sonyverse and the MCU all the time. Also in the comic books, he goes from, hey, I can roll with the Avengers and all these big time guys, but and go on excursions with the Fantastic Four. But I'm also just, a street character, but he still swings and flies above the streets, One of the things that makes Jessica Jones a street level character is even though she can fly, she hates flying and she doesn't fly very well. You know what I'm saying? In fact, she hates flying so much that we haven't seen her fly in the comics in forever, and we've never seen her fly in the TV series. So a lot of people forget that she's more than just super strong. Plus, she's not bullet resistant at all. You know what I'm saying? You could flick her in the face and it'll hurt. You know what I'm saying? A regular human, boom, it hurts. She could just flick you a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Street level characters, a character like Daredevil, probably the ultimate example of a street level character, precisely. What is this guy's superpower? He senses things. That's it. He doesn't shoot laser beams. He couldn't possibly shoot eye beams. You know what I'm saying? Like he's a guy who's blind. I hope that wasn't an ableism, but I mean, he's a character who's blind, but he has other ways of seeing. You know what I'm saying? But aside from that, he's not super strong. He's not super fast. I mean, when we look at one of the best things back in the day when Stan Lee was still doing, actually it was after Stan Lee, I believe, the later Stan Lee, when Gene Colan came along, they started making it so that Daredevil started fighting a lot of the Spider-Man enemies. And you got to see, hey, Spider-Man waxed the floor with Kingpin. Now he's like the ultimate villain because of him fighting Daredevil. Hey, Dr. Octopus and Scorpion, weren't really that much of a threat to somebody like Spider-Man, but against freaking Daredevil, it's like, holy crap, this hero could actually die. It's amazing. Even when they had Namor in the very early days, it was like, are you seriously putting Namor against Daredevil? Here's a guy who just doesn't stand a chance. He's a guy, like, his superpower, if you will, is to always get back up.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
basically the Rocky of the Marvel universe.
That's a good point. And Daredevil, I think we can use as a very in-depth case study in this conversation, because there's also the factor of his mental and emotional fallibility. That's a big part that drives his character in a lot of his stories. But the one thing, speaking of the sort of mental and emotional fallibility, one of the things that I like about what you'd mentioned regarding Jessica Jones and her having a distaste for flying is that it's also a part of sort of how humanity and her humanity and or her let me stop myself, how her intonation with humanity and the world that surrounds her on a micro level impacts her psychology. She doesn't like flying because it makes her feel less human. And I find that really fascinating, that she could probably be something of a greater physical force for justice, but there's a part of her sort of humanity that deprives her of the capacity to affect idealism. And I think that's really interesting. That's a very specific sort of case to Jessica Jones, and why I think she's an interesting talking point for this conversation.
I think I'm going to add a definition that I read. I'm going to read it verbatim because I don't want you to think I don't want you to think it flowed from my mouth, but I just think it describes Jessica Jones and Daredevil, and it's a definition of a flawed hero, and it reads: the flawed hero is potentially capable through insight of recognizing his or her moral limitation, seeing the damage it does to him or herself and others, and rectifying the behavior. Mm-hmm. And I think that's Jessica Jones, Daredevil to a T. They see all the damage. They see their own. They're self-aware, but they still make mistakes. They still suffer from taking their virtues sometimes to extremes, and it incapacitates them. And it's only through insight that they actually kind of grow as a character, and they learn to let go of the very things that are holding them back. I mean, Jessica Jones, at least on the show, is, I always like, she's a little bit unlikable, but she battles through it with humor, with pathos. You can relate to her, and yet she can be a real bitch, and yet she does seem to have some level of growth and insight. She gains insight as a character. And one of the things I really like about the street level heroes, those flawed heroes, is that it's through their gaining insight that justifies the change in their behavior. Because how often do we see it when, we review comic books? How many times do we accuse a writer or a comic book of a character acting out of character? Well, how do we know someone's acting out of character? It's because if a character changes direction, if there's no insight that leads to that change in behavior, it feels empty. It doesn't feel earned. And one thing about street level heroes is that they generally earn their insight, because they usually hit rock bottom. Something happens that gives them the insight that jars their behavior differently. And you don't see that in a lot in Superman and Wonder Woman, because they're always perfect. Superman and Wonder Woman are always giving the insight as opposed to receiving it. And that makes their stories less compelling, in my view.
Yeah, I think you said it brilliantly, man. I think that providing that definition too really resonates, I think, with why we tend to connect with these characters, because their everyday lives, their ups and their downs, are all impacted in a similar way to how our lives are impacted. They're impacted by people and products of a human world and human society. Bill, it looked like you were going to say something, though.
You were talking about Jessica Jones. Yeah, one of the reasons, I don't know why people consider her a bitch. To me, I look at it as, I was just commenting recently on Daredevil in one of my recent reviews, and I mentioned how, we shouldn't like Daredevil, Matt Murdock, because the true moral compass, the canary, if we look at the Boys TV show, the canary for Matt Murdock is Foggy Nelson, and who treats Foggy Nelson worse than anybody? I mean, literally, who does Matt Murdock treat worse than? Here's this guy who always comes back, and meanwhile, he always comes back like a punching bag. You remember Rock, I don't know if you remember, back when we were kids, we used to have that stupid little, thing you punch and it comes back up. Remember?
Yeah, of course.
That's stupid.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what that thing is called, but like the punching balloon, whatever. And it's like you punch it comes back up, and it's like, yes, I had a Godzilla one myself. It made me feel like King Kong. But I mean, like that's what that to me, it's like that encompasses what Daredevil is. He's an a-hole. You know what I'm saying? So why we would like him but not like Jessica? They're the same. They're the exact same characters. But to use Jessica Jones as that example, when she first started flying and really tried to take hold of the fact that I can fly, the first character that she met in Brian Michael Bendis's Alias comic where she was introduced was Thor. And then later on, she wound up like crashing and hurting herself, and she got up and didn't realize Thor was right there around a whole bunch of other people. And she had a potty mouth where she's like, "Mother effort, son of a goddamn," and just like that. And Thor was just like, lady, perhaps thou shouldst wash thy mouth with soap or something to that effect. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was too good. He looked down on her. He literally like snubbed his nose, well, figuratively snubbed his nose at her. And that's one of the things that separates a flawed hero from a god like Thor. Like, to me, I know a lot of people don't like Bendis. I don't like him on Superman, but Bendis has what it takes when he wants to. Look at the two characters that he paired and met each other, where she realized her real place in the world was as a street level F flying. You know what I'm saying? Because she met Thor. She met a god, someone who couldn't possibly, associate with humans, couldn't possibly, what do you call it? Understand humans. There's no commiseration there. So I think that was a great way to define like where the character actually belongs.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we could end up moving on into sort of case studies, going in depth on characters. We've already sort of started approaching Daredevil, but I think Daredevil, Matt Murdock, is very much exemplary of the conversation we're having on numerous counts. One, physically, he is limited. Although he is astoundingly capable in a very relative sense, in the realm of comic book characters, heroes, villains, he's relatively limited. Emotionally, Matt Murdock is totally unstable. And psychologically, although intelligent and intuitive, Matt struggles in many ways due to his trauma. And before we get into that, I did want to address Mark McKeever's question here. He wants to know what works better for street level characters, a loner or one that has an immediate family. I don't think either one of those is the right answer. I think they could both be the right answer, and neither one of them could be. I think either one of those situations could be done well. And I think it's all dependent on how they're performed, because I think street level characters, again, appeal to us because we can connect to them. And there are people that exist that are loners. There are people that have massive families that still feel that sort of loss, So I think either one of those things can work out well, depending on, who's writing it. What do you guys think?
Who's the most popular character in Marvel Comics?
Spider-Man.
Does he have a family?
I mean, Aunt May.
And he deals with the loss of his parents. You know what I'm saying? He deals with the loss of his Uncle Ben, which he feels personally responsible for. So a good combination of both would probably be, in my opinion, the right answer. I mean, Daredevil lost his parents, or, well, whatever, in different ways.
Right.
But yeah, like he deals with that, and his extended family would be Foggy, who he treats like, a redheaded freckle-faced stepchild. I don't know. I think that the family dynamic works better, which is something that's been missing from the comics forever. You got a Moon Knight character. Let's be realistic. Here's a guy who he hasn't had any kind of a family in forever. When he did have something of a family in Frenchie, like he wound up going bad and killing him, because it's like, who cares? Now he's got a daughter because of Bemis. And it's like, yeah, maybe that'll work, but we haven't actually seen it. Moon Knight is a character that's a great concept that has never actually really worked for long, and just for whatever reason. And it's a weird, I don't know, just a juxtaposition of what a street level character could be, but just isn't, falls short of.
Yeah, interesting point.
I would add the observation that street level characters often have very unsuccessful relationships. They're usually divorced. They're usually miserable. I mean, DC went through a period of time where Batman couldn't be happy, right? Batman, the Bat family couldn't have a relationship. Batwoman's marriage never took place because they didn't believe DC didn't want it to happen. There's this perception that family. I think maybe there's a preconception that a family is something that a writer can't escape because your family's always there. So instead of that, even with Spider-Man, got rid of the marriage and surround Spider-Man with friends to create the drama in the story. You can't give him family because you can't escape the family. And so I think that some of it, I think, has to do with lazy writing. But ultimately, I agree with you guys that there's no reason why you can't have compelling stories with family versus just good friends.
Yeah, and I really want to key on the specific term that you use of the perception, because there's very evidently this perception from editors, from comic book companies, that these characters need to lose any remotely healthy relationship in their lives in order to be compelling, which is just simply not true. Sure, if it's done well, you can obviously add a lot of tension into this character's life, and that could breathe life into story. But I think we've also learned that adding the unfamiliar element of maybe, I don't know, a healthy relationship could also do a lot for story. I just think that, in some cases, especially in the 90s and early to mid 2000s, comic book publishers were not willing to explore that alternative avenue of story because being gritty and sad and depressed, they felt like sold better.
It's probably why Disney was so happy to buy Marvel. It's like, wait, you guys don't like parents either? We're going to get along great.
You make a good point. And I definitely want to segue into, and we've already talked about him a lot, kind of putting a case study on Matt Murdock, because I think he appeals to the conversation in many ways. And as we do that, I want to let everybody know watching that I'm going to be giving you guys an opportunity to win a copy of this bad boy right here. First volume of Daredevil by Charles Soule. I thought this was a pretty apt one because this is literally an arc that brought Matt back down to the streets. So why not? Also, brilliant art by Ron Garney, and Charles Soule is great, adding that element of his experience as a lawyer to Matt Murdock. So in order to win, literally, the standard stuff, like this video, be subscribed. But if we can try to hit 20 likes, let's go for 20 likes by the time this stream ends, we'll be able to give one away. And in order to make sure that I can find out who's participating, comment down in the live chat who your favorite street level hero is, why, and why, I should say, with the hashtag. We'll do DD giveaway. That way I can find a means of finding everybody's comments. So make sure you guys follow all the rules, be subscribed to the channel, and comment down below in the live chat with who your favorite street level hero is and why, with the hashtag DD giveaway. And I will send one of you guys this awesome trade paperback as a thanks for participating in the live shows. So with that being said, let's talk a little bit more about Old Hornhead. Now, we've kind of broke the tip of the iceberg with Daredevil in this conversation. And one of the things that I think is worth talking about is that one of the reasons that I think Matt Murdock is challenged and his idealism was challenged very, very early on in his career is because he's been exposed to the worst in humanity. And I think that it's sort of leached on the idealism in the sense that, everybody is not good, everybody is not pure. And Murdock, I think, acknowledges that and feels that to an nth degree. So therefore, as Daredevil, he exacts punishment just as much as he does saving people. And I think we'll break into this conversation sort of through that lens. Do you guys think that Daredevil's idealism, is it still in there? Or do you think that he's mostly sort of running off of baser instincts and, I would say, his own desires?
First off, I take issue with you saying that he's the worst of things that happened to him, but we'll get into that later. There's another character I believe worse things have happened to, but it is funny that we are starting with Daredevil, because I think that he does encompass what a street hero has continuously meant more than anybody else. I mean, basically, this was Frank Miller's practice run and his audition for Batman, for
Right.
crying out loud, and so many other people also. But I feel that repeat the crux of your question again, please, so I can stay on topic.
No, it's all good. I tend to overword myself a lot,
No
so I'm
worries.
not even sure if I came out with a good question. So regarding Matt Murdock, we're talking about how his experiences, his traumas, and him being so embedded with humanity has deprived him of the ability to be an idealist. And I'm wondering if you guys think that a level of idealism still exists within Matt Murdock. Why or why not? And sort of, if you choose either one of those answers, do you think that his crusade as Daredevil is fueled by the idealism or something else?
If it wasn't fueled by that idealism, then he wouldn't be a compelling superhero, street level or otherwise, but especially street level. Yes, I believe that it is fueled. Basically, the origin that every single person agrees, as far as Daredevil is concerned, is that just quickly, that his father died while working for the mob, hiding that he was working for the mob, and dropping taking falls in boxing matches. He could have been so much better. He was the hero of Hell's Kitchen. He made everybody, like, he was the Cinderella man for all intents and purposes, but he took the dive because he was trying to, stay on the good side of the mob, the Magia, to not piss off the actual mob by Marvel, trying to keep his son safe, trying to do all these things and be a good role model while not actually being a good role model. It was more of perception than anything else. And Daredevil strives to prove to himself, and in a sense prove to his father, that, Dad, you could have been the best, and I'm going to show you that. And it's through his religiosity that allows him to believe that he actually is in communion with his father. In some, like, at the very least, his father is looking down on him. You know what I'm saying? It's not even quite so theoretical, like with Peter Parker thinking Uncle Ben is looking down on him. No, he believes metaphysically his father is looking down on him, next to God, and, trying to smile as much as possible. And that desire to live up to his father's principle. I mean, for crying out loud, I know that, we want to get more women into comics, and I agree, we should try and get more women into comic books. But what character really shows a young man's struggle more than anything, right? Here's his father. He's trying to live up to his ideals, even past death. He has a mentor in Stick. Thank you, Frank Miller. It's like, which all I believe all young boys need, another male father type figure, saying that mentor to teach you outside of what you're going to get in the home. Holy crap, we've got that here. You know what I'm saying? Luke Skywalker, and Obi-Wan, nothing. This is that real mentorship that he tried to appeal to him, and and Stick wasn't having it. It's like, you're never going to live up to my ideals. But that Daredevil only looked at that as a challenge. And everything in his life is toxic. Elektra, Stick, saying his relationship, good and bad with the Hand, with other characters, with Spider-Man. Like, he doesn't get along with anybody. The only person who's always by his side, as we always talked about, is his human punching bag, Foggy. It's like, this is... It's one of the most messed up characters you could possibly imagine, but it's so engaging, and his supporting characters build what he is. It's the foundation of what Daredevil is, so that every time he goes out and punches people in the face or racks them in the teeth with their billy club, we know that he's got something to go back to, and he's going to have conflict with it also, because of those ideals that he's trying to live up to, and he's never going to reach, because one is somebody who's dead, the other person is somebody who doesn't care.
Well said. Boom, what do you think?
I agree with the professor that it's Daredevil's idealism that actually makes him a street level character at heart, primarily because it's connected. In an idealistic character if it's well written, like Daredevil always is. I mean, is Daredevil not consistently one of the best written characters in comics? And there's a reason for it. Every writer that approaches Daredevil understands and does one thing intuitively, and they introduce contradictions into Daredevil's life. He's an idealistic person, yet on the one hand, he can show gentle nobility to Karen Page, regardless of her background as an adult film star or whatever she does wrong, her drug-addicted past. And yet at the same time, how do you reconcile that gentle nobility with the vengeance required by Daredevil to relentlessly and numerous times stop a serial killer like Bullseye? He is constantly faced with the contradictions as a lawyer of keeping secrets, keeping confidentiality, and playing those secrets against the other, and not even revealing them to his own friends, to his own allies. So he's got professional obligations, personal obligations, and also conflicts of faith that always come into play. And it's those contradictions that it's impossible for an idealist faced with those contradictions to not become street level. And that creates empathy. We can relate to that. And it's the empathy that makes it compelling.
You guys make a good point. I do want to throw something in there, though, in that I think that Matt Murdock's idealism is very different from and very unpure idealism. I think a lot of Matt Murdock is filled by guilt. And I feel like a part of his sort of subconscious understands that, you know, Matt Murdock is primarily motivated by guilt. And I think he takes on a lot of unnecessary guilt in order to keep himself going as Daredevil. I mean, you know, he's been tortured numerous times at the sort of consequences of his own mistakes and the mistakes of people he's held dear. And so it's hard for me to classify Matt as an idealist because his ideals exist, but they're warped by tragedy, by guilt, and by his own fallibility, really. I mean, we've talked numerous times about how flawed of a character he is, but I don't know. I can't think of a proper way to describe how exactly his ideals operate and how to properly describe him, because although he operates on an ideal, they feel impure in a way. You guys get what I'm saying? Like,
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, that's fair.
I would add to that. I think I have an idea what you say is that, and it's building. I thought on what Professor Bill was sort of saying, that in many ways Daredevil maybe shouldn't be as likable a character as he is, or maybe because he's kind of a jerk like Tony Stark, only in different ways. But the reality is we tend to judge characters less harshly when we know those characters are capable of a high degree of self-reflection. And Daredevil, Matthew Murdock, more so than arguably any other character in fiction, is always reflecting on his characterization, almost to a fault. Maybe it's his Catholic background where he's always thinking he's going to hell for some damn reason. But I mean, we tend to judge characters less harshly that are self-aware of their own fallibility. And that's Matthew Murdock in a nutshell. And I think ultimately that's why Foggy Nelson remains his friend, because Foggy Nelson sees that. And let's be honest, we're always hardest on those we love the most. And so not only when we look at the harshness of Matthew Murdock, the way he treats his best friend, Foggy Nelson, we also see that there's love there, because we probably, as much as we hate to admit it, would acknowledge that sometimes we can be pretty most harsh on our friends that we love the most and on our family that we love the most.
Yeah.
Introspection is specifically what you're talking about. And yes, nobody does it better than Matt Murdock. More than that, to add to what you're saying, him looking at his introspection, it's also helpful that we see it's obvious, it's apparent that we can see what his list of do's and do nots are. There's the 10 Commandments, you know? When he breaks one of those, it's like, oh no. Even if you haven't memorized the 10 Commandments, you get a gist of them. If you're not familiar with the 7 deadly sins, most of us have a good gist of what they are. You know what I'm saying? When he breaks one of those, that's one of those things where it's like, if you're going to make him break one of those, it has to be for a good reason. This is what I've got to do to stop Kingpin. This is what I have to do in order to get at Bullseye and stop him from killing somebody, some innocent person.
Mhm.
I'm going to take these sins onto myself. I know Nick Spencer's a Sin Eater, but you get the gist.
Well, yeah, what's really interesting is, and you bring up the topic of a sin eater, is it's a common sort of mythological creature in fantasy storytelling, used for these creatures that literally will, in some contexts, get hired by horrible people in order to sort of absolve them of feeling their own sins. And Matt Murdock sort of being described as a sin eater, I feel like is perfect, because him as Daredevil is an embodiment of that. He takes on not only the sins of himself, but of humanity. And he is, for all intents and purposes, the prosecutor in that regard. And what's interesting about Matt is that he places a lot of he allows himself to feel guilty because of other folks' situations. I mean, you look at obviously Elektra's death, Karen Page's death, and you could keep going on and on and on. But what I like about Matt Murdock is how he cannot absolve himself of the guilt, and I don't think he wants to. I've always had this idea of a Daredevil story in my head. And I don't want to go into detail because I really do hope to write it someday, but it revolves around Daredevil's paradise being in purgatory. Matt Murdock thrives when he suffers because it motivates him to continue being Daredevil. And I feel like he takes that, and no matter how battered and bruised he comes out, he uses that as a means to fuel his engine. And I don't know. And I think that's also one of the reasons why we as fans love Matt Murdock, is because the mistakes he makes are very human. Although they are not always reasonable, they're human. He makes very petty ones at that. So I think that's a big reason. And I think I'll just sort of classify his idealism as non-traditional idealism, because I think when you think of traditional idealism, you think of characters like Superman that have this very pure sort of idea at how he's gonna save the world and how absolute it is in many ways. But Daredevil, although he has the ideals to save humanity, he cannot operate on them in an idealistic way.
Boom, you're probably closest to the prairies. How do you feel about the way that big city cynicism clashes with the country ideals? Which you just mentioned Superman, Dark Knight. So I mean, it makes sense. Like, it's not even just so much about conservatism for me. It's about the idea, like, for me, some of the absolute best people that I know are from more rural areas, because they don't have to deal with so many people around them and so many conflicting ideas. And while assimilation is good, while immigration is good, I believe all these things, it's sort of that cynicism based on, your idealism is great, but it's not very realistic, especially not where I live. How do you rectify
let me
that?
tell you, I'll delve a little bit. There's maybe a little bit of politics in this, but I don't mean to add it, but never underestimate the power of Catholic guilt to actually create a better society.
Are you a Catholic?
Well, I was raised Catholic, but I'm not preaching here. Okay,
all of us. Here we go.
My point being is, first of all, statistically, and this is a fact, people of faith, any religion, people of practicing faith are generally happier people. That's just a statistical fact. And there's all kinds of studies that show that. And there's a reason for that. And I think that, playing into our conversation, if you feel guilty about doing something wrong, if you're always feeling guilty because you could do better, if you're like Matthew Murdock, that you're never good enough for yourself, you're always striving to be better. You're always striving to impress this unknown deity that you imagine in your head. And there's something noble about that. And there's nothing wrong with that. So on the one hand, you could say, well, Daredevil's guilt is also his vice, and it sometimes doesn't serve him well. But the vast majority of the time, it allows him to serve others, and that's what he does. He really is in service to others. Daredevil every day wakes up and asks himself, "How may I serve?" Not to get all spiritual and religious, but Daredevil is spiritual and religious. That's what he does. He asks, "How may I serve?" He goes to confession. He confesses his sins. And that to me is, and when you talk about, to direct your question about I don't know if there's necessarily, in the age of the internet, I don't know if there's a distinction anymore necessarily between rural and city life anymore, because everything seems to be, that internet's made us closer. But I will say that there is the so-called traditional conservative values that might still be associated with rural communities, I think is grounded in a degree of faith. And while conservatism might be getting a bad rap under the current climate, I do think where it's saving grace and where we can still learn from it, and it has something to show us, is the importance of faith and how it can still serve society.
Yeah. Let me challenge him on something he said specifically, if you don't mind, DK.
Yeah, go for it.
Check this out. Now, one of the things you said that I have a different viewpoint on, he's taking a drink to get ready for this one. Let's go. You say that he wakes up and says, "How can I serve?" You also say that he said that people who are religious are usually happier. Yes, 100%. I've seen the statistics and I get that. One of the reasons why people who are of faith are usually happier is because they believe that no matter what is put out there by them or anybody else, that for the most part, it will be forgiven. As long as they acknowledge it, as long as they're introspective about it, it will be forgiven, that it's in God's hands. You don't have to put so much stress on yourself. Say like, Jesus died for this thing that I did. It's usually more stress-free. We believe, religious people believe, that it will all work out well in the end. I think it's Daredevil's conflict with his faith, Daredevil's inability to trust God, to believe that, sure, Jesus died for this thing, that he says, I need to take this into my own hands. Mm-hmm. And he's still trying to deal with who he is as a religious person, trying to serve God, but trying to kind of like, what do they call it? Forced revelation, something like that. When it's like, oh, when the what do you call it? The walls of when the Temple of Solomon is rebuilt, that's when the Messiah will come, and blah blah blah. So people try to force the revelation, and it's like, no, stop! It should happen by itself, right? People don't trust God to do it, or God's not doing it fast enough, so they try to make it happen first, and that's kind of who Daredevil is to me.
And if I can add on that a little bit, the thing I like, the thing that I think makes
point, Professor, I agree with that. Like I don't actually disagree with what you just said. I think it's even consistent with what I said, to be honest.
It is. That's the only reason why I even thought about it, was because it's like, it's going right in line with what you said.
Sure.
I just don't want to get into a fist fight with you.
Oh. DK, go ahead. Sorry, buddy. I didn't.
What I was saying is adding on to that, the thing about Matt Murdock that is so interesting about his faith and how his faith drives him is that he's not absolute in his faith. He questions it, and things that he sees and interacts with and things that affect him and the people around him force him to question his faith. And that's what I find so interesting, is that I think in a way Matt Murdock is seeking to try and validate his own faith through his actions as Daredevil and through his actions as Matt Murdock. And I find that particularly interesting, because I think that a lot of times when characters live on an almost theological level, whether it's directly or indirectly, it tends to be in an almost absolute way. This happened because God, that happened because God wills it, God wills it. Whereas Daredevil, I think, is looking for a reason. So and Daredevil to me, it reminds me very much of like John Milton in Paradise Lost, in the way that John Milton's claim is to justify God's word to man. In a way, I think Daredevil is desperately looking to do that, but he's trying to justify it to himself. And he uses the practices of the Catholic faith as a blueprint for him to ask those questions, and he does it through his actions as Daredevil. And what makes him so compelling in a way, what makes him compelling, and in the same way, it also impurifies his idealism is that I don't think he always believes the faith at face value. He needs to feel it for himself. And I think part of what makes him so compelling is that he struggles with his faith in not only in God, but in men. You see countless times when he goes over the edge and he beats somebody half to death, or at the end, near the end of Frank Miller's run, where he drops Bullseye off of an electrical wire, like countless feet down, just for him to break his neck, is because he struggles to maintain faith in God and in man. And I think that's profound because it impacts his reflection of himself as well.
Yeah, I would just add to that what's left if you lose your faith? I mean, let's be honest here. If whatever your faith is in your mind, if you lose it, like we could ask the question, why does Daredevil keep his faith, since he always seems to struggle with it? I mean, my God, if you struggle with something so long, if you're dragging around a bunch of garbage, at some point, dump it and move on. But yet he still keeps his faith. Why does he do that? Why does he keep his faith? Even though his faith causes him a lot of problems and he struggles with it, he's afraid of what happens if he gives it up. What is he going to replace it with? He's so used to, it's the life that he knows. It's the devil. The devil's in the details, but so's the angels. And if he gives up that faith, what is he going to replace it with? And that's at the end of the day, all we have left is our belief system. I remember I had a client who was a former a member of a bike gang, and he said the hardest thing he had to overcome when he left when he was ostracized from the gang. Long story, I won't go into it. Suffice to say that he didn't know what the rules were anymore. He, as rigid as the rules and the code of conduct was when he was part of that family, he knew what the rules were. He felt secure. He felt safe. And when he wasn't part of that group, when he wasn't part of that group anymore, he felt lost. And his whole life, he had to reevaluate his entire life. And I think that's what happens to street level characters like Daredevil. You take away their faith. He's gone through his whole life. It's all he's ever known. And as many problems as it's caused him, if you don't know, what are you going to replace it with?
Are you prepared to talk about somebody else now? Because I think that was a great segue into somebody else in Marvel.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, all I was really going to say was that I'm commending his comment here, because I think it really does resonate with, why Daredevil sort of struggles to validate himself. And I think in a way it's self-destructive, actually. I do think in some way Daredevil actually uses his faith and the sort of rigid moral guidelines of faith to be at touch with that Catholic guilt, so that it fuels him to do better. But I'm not going to say any more, because I think you said it so well. But Bill, you said you have a perfect segue going into another sort of case study. What are you thinking?
Actually, I think that Boom did that, but how about Captain America?
Interesting.
Arguably a very street level hero who just has the will and desire to play at a much higher game if necessary, like with the Avengers and whatnot. He's not in the Avengers. He's not valued for his ability to punch a bad guy in the face. Like, what's punching Galactus in the face going to do, right? But his leadership and his understanding of seeing things that most people can't see, similar to Daredevil. Did you already have that set up?
No, actually.
Oh, you just typed it in that quick? Nice. When you talk about losing morals, some of the best Captain America stories are when he loses faith in America.
Well, go ahead. Well, the interesting thing is that I was thinking about Captain America as a counterpoint to the main topic, and sort of my argument for the main topic in a way, because Captain America does have a much more pure form of idealism, even to the extent where, you get into stories like Civil War, where half of the world, half of the Marvel universe is essentially looking at him as the enemy. He is so rigid in his idealism that he maintains it through all else. Now, we do see him waver when it comes to the end of the story, where he gives himself in. Spoilers for a story that's over a decade old. But I think even in that sense, him giving himself up was in a way a manifestation of his idealism. I don't see it as much as of him wavering, but we'll even get into Comic
Why
Boom's.
did he give himself up? This is important.
I mean, to stop the bloodshed, pretty much.
Which is exactly what you said is something that a street level hero can do.
Mm-hmm.
They can see the destruction around them. Tony Stark couldn't. To him, it's like he just sees dollar signs. Captain America saw this is not what this was supposed to be about.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Captain America's idealism, is rigid. It is solid. He's basically Superman, like street level Superman.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why he's my favorite hero. For me, I see Captain America's unwavering faith in an ideal, not some easily some man-made thing, but not metaphysical like religion.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that like it's grounded. It's people who came together and agreed upon something. And he sees the flaws, the chinks in the system, the kinks, excuse me, that was wrong of me. But anyway, the kinks in the system. He sees the flaws. He sees everything that's wrong in the system. And he says, no, that's not cool. He is Samuel Clemens, typically known as Mark Twain. He is that guy who's going to see what's wrong and not just make a compromise all the time. People who are scared make compromises. People who are brave, people who feel like I don't have anything less. Oh, like what does it take to protest? It takes a lot, and I don't want to turn this into political either. But what does it take to protest? It takes. What else is there? What is the last straw for me? What is the last step? When am I willing to say no? I'm not taking that straw. It will break my back if it's not broken already. You can't push me back any further. My back's up against a wall. Damn it. And Captain America is the guy that doesn't need to be pushed to the end, doesn't need to be broken, doesn't need all that stuff to say no. He knows what he believes in. Like, this is a character who I believe conservatives and liberals, Republicans and Democrats, anybody can get behind. The libertarians and progressives. Anybody can get behind this character if they really understand this character. If you just take the America out of the name. I mean, like, I've seen people wearing Captain America t-shirts in the Middle East, in Egypt and Saudi Arabia specifically. You know what I'm saying? I've seen them wearing it in Europe. I've seen them wearing this. It's like, and when I say, like, what does that mean to you? You know what I'm saying? And it's like, this is a guy who, like, he knows what he stands for. He always knows. There's never a question. He's not trying to figure his life out. He's figured his life out. And he's like, he's confident that this is what's right, and he's walking forward with it. I mean, to me, I understand the idea of him being, too rigid, but look at what that rigidity stands for. Look at what it is.
Well, I think the thing about Captain America in a metaphorical sense is that he shields himself with his ideals. He uses his ideals as a means to push back against adversity and things that are contradictory or antagonistic towards these very, I would say, humanitarian-based ideals. And what I find interesting about Cap, and you brought it up there, is that, I mean, he's a grown-ass man who has his shit together. Like, he knows what he wants out of his life. And what's cool about Captain America's sort of persisting narrative is that the challenges he faces are things that seek to undermine the things that he already knows. Now, he's human, so there are times where he does feel challenged, and he does have to find a way to recover himself in those ideals, and maybe at times even reshape his ideals for a modern era. But at the heart of it, what I like about Captain America is that he knows who he is. He has his ideals, and they're very pure, and he's not afraid to operate on them. But Boom, do you have any comments regarding Bill's great statement on Cap?
Yeah, it was a great statement. So were yours. I don't have any much to add to it. I'm just going to let your comments sit there. I will just add, though, another potentially political reference, and that is to say, in reference to Captain America's the Marvel's big event, Secret Empire, I do believe that segueing from your comments into just a quick note on Secret Empire, I think that's one of the reasons why it was so poorly received, is that the Captain America and Secret Empire, I think many fans, myself included at some level, I was hoping that even Hydra Captain America would in the end see through the moral blackness that he had become, and ultimately be able to see through and possess the self-awareness to see through the fascism that had possessed him, despite the fact that that a magic whatever cube made him into a Nazi or whatever, a Hydra agent. And the fact that never happened, it wasn't really Captain America, and that's why that storyline never worked. Because it really robbed that storyline. It never felt street level. It really felt like a different Captain America in many, I think, in the eyes of many people, because he lacked that self-awareness. He seemed to have it on the surface, but the self-awareness came to the conclusion of fascism. And that conclusion was very, very, very disturbing. And boy, oh boy, you can really draw some analogies to the present political climate, and I'll just leave it at that.
DK, go up 4 comments. Some Okie dude. Cap, a grounded hero. So I'd like to comment on that. Whenever in the comic books something bad happens, some event, I don't care which, it just happened recently in Miles Morales. Whenever something bad happens, where I don't care if it's political or somebody stomping on your rights, somebody doing something that's just morally wrong, contextually wrong, who always shows up at the last minute? Who's that guy who shows up? Who's that hero who shows up and doesn't fix it for you, but rather stands with that flag, that unbreakable Superman chest in the form of an object? It stands up and says, I will lend you this, but I'm not going to do it for you. You show me one more grounded hero than Captain America, because in my opinion, there are none.
The interesting thing about Cap is that he's our voice in a very in a very representative way amongst, Titans. Captain America is an Avenger. He is oftentimes the leader of the Avengers. Why? Because he leads by the examples of his idealism. And that's the thing that I think makes Cap so profound, is that, he can't operate on his ideals in the way that someone like Superman can. It's very easy for somebody, and I love Supes, but it's very easy for somebody to shove him away and say, well, Superman can literally do anything. And if we're getting like real hairy into the Silver Age, he could literally do anything. He could pop little Superman out from his fingers. So, but even under a modern context, the thing I think is so profoundly interesting about Captain America as a symbol of humanity and in really proper human idealism is that he doesn't have the means to operate on his ideals in a way that is unscathed. He has to make some serious sacrifice in order to maintain that idealism. And that's something that I think is really, really interesting. And I'm really glad you said what you did, Bill, because I think it really helped me to sort of develop how I consider Captain America under this context as a street level hero. And I think the thing that Samoki Dude is kind of having a little bit of difficulty reconciling with is that
just his opinions, no difficulty.
Right. Well, I think a part of what I think he might not be acknowledging, though, is that Captain America is driven by idealism over trauma. A lot of these other street level characters that we're talking about, their idealism is impacted by their trauma. And again, you look at Captain America, he's a physical metaphor for using his idealism to protect.
Yeah. When Michelini was revisiting this is in an Iron Man comic, the demon in a bottle concept, the idea that, Tony Stark really does have a drinking problem. He's laying there on the ground and he betrayed Captain America. You know what I'm saying? And all that. But this is actually coming up from the Iron Wars or Armor Wars stuff. Who was there to give a hand up, not a handout, a hand up to Iron Man. It was Captain
Mm.
America. And he's like, and this is when it was revealed. He's like, dude, my father was an alcoholic. The things that I seen him do, the things that he did to me, to my mom, like it was a horrible person. And he wasn't able to get back up. But I believe that you can. I believe that you could be better than what my father was. So he does have that trauma. But like you said, he's not driven by that. Also, one of the big, if anybody did have a problem with Captain America, it is seeing that America attached to the back of his name. And a lot of times what people think that Captain America is a servant to the government, which would actually be this version of Superman.
Mm.
You remember from Dark Knight
Dark Knight
Returns.
Returns.
That is the exact antithesis of what Captain America is. That it's not about idealism for this version of Superman, for Frank Miller's version of Superman. Rather, it's Captain America's willingness to say, "I hold on to the dream, not the flag. The flag is just some thing in the air. What is America? It's not a bunch of old men in Congress determining what young man is going to go off and fight in combat. Saying because some rich F-tard decided, hey, this will be good for my bottom line. No, it's the ideals of what the Constitution was based upon, why we revolted in the first place.
Right.
Well, not you, Boom. You're a Canadian through and through. But anyway, as for the rest of us Tea Partiers, no, man, absolutely. Like Captain America is that guy who holds on to an ideal. And yes, he is, unyielding in it.
Mm.
And that's one of the things that just makes him so compelling. He's willing to fight against the system, and he doesn't have the means to do that. He has the heart, and he has a shield.
I think that identification of nuance is very important because, like you said, Captain America is driven by an ideal that is put forward by America, not by America itself. And that's where you begin to border on that DKR Superman. And, he's driven, he too closely intertwines the idealism of America and the physical country of America itself and everything.
Sorry, my wife was.
No, it's all good. I was saying that the important thing is that you identify the nuance between.
Oh, gotcha. So we're still talking about Cap. Okay.
The idealism and how Cap ultimately represents and protects the idealism that America stands for. And the issue is that DKR Superman too closely intertwines the idealism with the actual country itself. And I think that although Superman in DKR, his intentions are pure, he misunderstands that America and the idealism of America are individual concepts that
he
can
was
be
basically
fought
just
for.
an agent of the state, and that's not cool.
Right.
And also, for the sake of some Okie dude's statement, his most recent one, no, I don't think that he would have liked any president after Carter, personally. So not just he wouldn't have liked Trump. He wouldn't have liked any. He wouldn't have liked Reagan. He wouldn't have liked Clinton. He wouldn't have liked either Bush. He wouldn't have liked Obama. He wouldn't have liked any of them. So.
Interesting point.
I just want to come to the defense of Superman for a second, and this
I'm here for it.
Maybe my capping comment, and I want to just give some reference that we can talk about how great and compelling street level heroes are, but let me tell you something. It's when you lose the most idealistic hero of all that the street level heroes lose parts of themselves as well. And I refer to the all-time classic Kingdom Come, where Superman had a crisis of faith, akin perhaps even to what Matthew Murdock might go through. He had a loss of faith in humanity, but then he gained some insight, and he confronted Magog, and he didn't avoid Magog because he was fearful of Magog. He had lost faith in humanity, and when Superman came back, that epic page of him returning, stopping a cynical, narcissistic new generation of heroes. When he came back, his mere image changed the landscape. It changed the world, and he possessed Superman, idealistic Superman, tainted a little bit, still possessed the self-awareness to let Billy Batson make the call. Billy Batson, that both God and human, make the call as to what decision to make, whether or not to stop that nuclear bomb from hitting and destroying all the heroes. That came from somebody who was the pure idealist, who went through a crisis of faith, but still came back and possessed the insight to make that call at the 11th hour. So I think it's so important that we all can acknowledge that the better stories probably arise from the street level heroes, because we can relate to them more only because we don't possess the strength of character to remain idealists through all the suffering that we go through. And just as a final comment, I think Matthew Murdoch might make a better Buddhist than a Catholic.
I'm going to disagree.
Buddhist, and that's right up Matthew Murdoch's alley.
I'm going to disagree, but okay.
I don't know. Not enough judgment in Buddhism, you know. I think there needs to be judgment in Matt Murdoch's theological dietary plan. Right. But I think the thing about Superman is, and the reason I think he appeals to a lot more adults now than he has in a long time is that he's actually sort of the contrast to a lot of what we're exposed to nowadays. We're constantly, you know, we're in this loop of information traveling at such fast speeds, and that information could be truthful, it could be dishonest, it could be indifferent, but we're exposed to so much negativity now that I think the reason Superman has become so much more valuable, I think, to a lot of us that understand this is because we need that light in the sort of moral grayness that is the world we live in a way that I don't think we've needed it as much as we do now. And I get your point. You know, there's obviously, I will never say that we should live in a world where Superman should not exist, because regardless of whether or not it is popular or trendy to be good, I think Superman serves a very valuable point and a very valuable purpose to, you know, idealism and our conceptions of humanity. But I still think that for the most part, these street level characters, these characters that are impacted by very real things, perhaps in an exaggerated way because they live in a sci-fi fantasy-esque world, you know, we can connect with that. Whereas Superman, you know, I mean, he hasn't been more popular than when he had a kid in like the last 20 years. I mean, that's what drove people back to Superman. That's what drove me to become a real fan of Superman. I had read some of the classics. I was like, okay, these are good. But it wasn't until Superman faced a very human problem that I could attach myself to him. And that might just be me. Maybe I'm looking for characters that, you know, that could just be me looking to, you know, find things for me to personally connect to with the character. But I do think that characters ultimately need to have some sort of central thrust that we can relate to.
So I think Boom also, we're just laughing at BB Chip's comment. That's freaking hysterical. So I think that we should move on to another street level hero. And also the viewership has doubled. So maybe repeat that contest.
Yeah. So for those of you that are just now joining us, apropos of our conversation on street level characters, I'm going to be giving away, where did I put it? The first volume, Charles Soule and Ron Garney's Daredevil run. It brings Matt back to the streets of New York in a cool black costume. But nonetheless, I want to put this out there for those of you that join us live and become parts of these great conversations. So in order for you to enter and to win a copy, we must hit 21 likes by the end of the stream. You must be subscribed to the channel. And in order for me to find you, to make sure that I can get back in touch with you in the live chat, let us know who your favorite street level character is and why with the hashtag DD giveaway. Everything is going to be scrolling on the screen down below, and thank you, Bill, for reminding me to let you guys know. But yeah, so make sure you guys follow everything, and I mean everything. If you don't do the comment with the hashtag, I can't find out, you know, who you are. I can't get back in touch with you. I'm going to use that as a means to search you up at the end of this conversation. So make sure you guys share this video, get some more people in here so we can hit that like goal. But
stop talking about Superman. Let's get talking about another street level hero. Damn it.
Damn it. So I think that, you know, we're teetering on like an hour and a half. So I do want to get down to some pretty definitive case studies. I have a couple in my head, but I'm wondering if either of you two have a specific character that you really want to dig into.
Batman.
Yes. Okay, cool. I'm glad we're on the same page. So the thing about Batman, and I think Batman in some ways exemplifies what we've been talking, or what I had sort of suggested at the beginning about sort of their interaction with humanity, their lives. Also good point. The thing about Batman is that he both sort of represents idealism and somebody's idealism being drained by their humanity. And as I'm changing this banner here, I will leave it to one of these gentlemen here to state their case for Batman in this conversation.
First off, I want to define Batman as at best / worst Tower of Babel Batman, where I don't like, again, this is just my personal taste. I don't care if somebody likes or dislikes or agrees or disagrees with what I say. Everybody's opinion is valid. But I personally have a strong distaste for Justice League Batman. I have a strong distaste for, cosmic adventures and fourth world Batman. I dislike any of that stuff. I don't want to see Batmandium. I don't want to see any of that nonsense. The highest I will go is Tower of Babel, which in my headcanon is that's what Batman said would need to be done, his contingency plan, but he didn't have the capability of actually doing a lot of those things. So that's the furthest, that's the most far-fetched I can get with Batman, because I do believe that he should be a Gothamite street level hero. And when we talk about a character who is built off of tragedy, his personal tragedy, when you look at the idea that his parents, his mother and father, were essentially the final linchpins and the ultimate pillars. All right, we talked about religion with Daredevil. In Islam, you have what's called the 5 pillars of Islam. As long as those 5 pillars stand, then Islam remains standing. If any of those pillars break in any order or whatever, as they're breaking, Islam becomes, more shaky. And if they all break, boom, it falls. That's it, done, right? Likewise, you had a bunch of figureheads that were very important to Gotham City. They all fell, but the most important ones were Thomas and Martha Wayne. And when they fell, when they were killed by a regular person, Joe Chill, in a freaking alley after watching Zorro, that's when all of a sudden Gotham just turned straight to crap. There was nothing else anybody could do. And it took too long for Bruce to grow up, to be taught by Alfred, not just boxing and little stuff like that, but actually how to be a grown-up, how to be a man. One of the things that I actually enjoyed that I think it was Tom King who did that. Was it the second Batman annual
Yes.
during his run? That was Tom King?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. When he showed that Alfred's father neglected his family because he thought, the Waynes are going to be more important, and raising the Waynes and teaching them what us common folk need is important. We're the only voice that they're ever going to really hear and listen to. This is the only chance for a poor person to get inside the home and the heads of these guys, which, again, one more reason why Alfred is so crucial, and killing him was dumb. But
thank you.
Whatever. I'm not going to go there. I digress. So Batman, knowing that or feeling that he's responsible for his parents' death. And they're not just, and a lot of people like, yeah, your mom and dad died, get over it. No, hello. These were not just any parents. These aren't like your mom and my dad and blah, 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 whatever. These were linchpins to the most important city, at least in New Jersey, but absolutely in the country and possibly the world, Gotham City. And when they fell, Gotham fell, morals fell, morale fell and morals fell. Everything hit rock bottom. The gangsters wound up taking over. This led to people like the Joker and others to form. And you look at what Batman had to do, what Bruce Wayne had to do to try and quell that. He couldn't be only like his father. He had to be so much more.
An excellent metaphor, Professor, that the Thomas and Martha Wayne being the pillars, the fall of Thomas and Martha Wayne, their deaths, it's a metaphor for the loss in all our lives of the pillars in all our lives, and what's left when we lose our strengths. What are pillars in our own life? What happens when we lose the people that we consider the most important in our lives? What's left? Can we train ourselves to be the best that we can be, like young Bruce Wayne did? Bruce Wayne had Alfred. How many of us don't have an Alfred in our lives? I mean, the metaphor is there, and the inspiration of Batman is he has to become street level, because Yes, he's a billionaire and he has the advantage of being a billionaire, but Batman isn't like Batman. Batman, he's not using his capacity as a billionaire to really serve Gotham. He's actually being Batman. He's using his money to finance being a street level hero, which is ironic. He's someone who, as a billionaire, is almost inaccessible and unrelatable to your average street level person, and yet he becomes Batman and learns and is street level in his darker identity. It is quite extraordinary. And the a quick note about Batman, and then DK, you can comment, is I know, Professor, that you don't like the fantastical spacefaring astronaut Batman. I get that. However, I will say that Batman is in my view, often I consider him the only Marvel-like character in the DC universe. And so they're forced to use Batman in all those fantastical settings. And that's why I think it's kind of interesting that Batman, I like Batman, because whenever DC uses Batman, the reason why I find him so interesting is that Batman is a perfect character in the DC universe when they do have those, when they go against gods, is that he's us. Batman really is us. Batman, when those scenes when Batman talks smart to a god, or he doesn't take BS from anybody, God or Amazon or Darkseid, that is awesome. When he's defying death, when he's wearing his bats, his like when he's wearing this, when he's like this, and he's going into, when he's battling Darkseid for his son's soul to bring Damian back, I mean, that's just awesome. I don't know, but there's almost a visceral street level. He brings the street level fight to the gods. And that's what I like about Batman, is that he can channel that in a way that can sometimes bring those big event stories down a peg or two, and even make somebody who, like yourself, prefers the more grounded stories, I think, maybe have some resonance.
First off, I like to give credit where credit's due. For crying out loud, where'd he go? Wow, there were a lot of comments. Detective Comics Productions is right. It was actually Tom Taylor who did that. I'm looking at it was Batman Annual number 3 where it happened, and that was a Tom Taylor story. So thank you to Dark Knight Productions.
Cool. Yeah. Good call. I think in a way I can see where both of you are coming from. And I also, gosh, we're doing it again. I'm agreeing with Boom in some capacity. The earth is become unsalted. I think Batman does have a place tangling in the sandbox of the gods, because I think he is a perfect sort of contrast and an example as to what humanity can aspire to be capable of. But I think that those instances should be used sparingly, because when Batman is constantly going up into space, or constantly tangling with the likes of the New Gods or Darkseid, or, one of Bendis's millions of royalty machines out in space, you deprive Batman of that contrast. And it becomes a little bit too regular for him. Now, what I will say is that the interesting part about Batman is, when it comes to his idealism, he's actually, to me, somewhere on the spectrum of Superman at one end and Daredevil on another end, where Batman's ideals are a little bit more rigid and absolute. He's not seeking to validate, right, his idealism in the way that Matt Murdock is. He knows what he wants. He knows what he has to do to operate on those ideals, and in where he tends to lean more towards Daredevil than Superman is that he's willing to do less morally acceptable things in order to get there. And that's what I like about Batman. And one of the things as to why I think Bruce really appeals to us is that although he lives in a world of circumstances that we might not be able to relate to, he operates on ideals that I think we can relate to in that space. So I mean, I don't know if there's any way I can really do better than explaining how I feel about Batman, other than to say I'm somewhere in between the two of you. Which I guess nobody wanted to hear. I get to be the one that rides the middle here. But what's interesting about Bruce is that he is so uncompromising in what he does in many ways. and yet he is also limited by his biology, by his sort of emotional hmm, I would say his emotional stability, but he still pushes himself in a degree that would make you think, this guy is in the same space as a Superman where he can accomplish anything, but he can't. He's limited by many means in the same way that a lot of these street level characters are, but he operates on ideals that are very much greater than himself. And that's what I think is interesting in watching Batman struggle to accomplish and operate on his ideals.
Hmm.
Ben.
Let's see here. Let's see if anybody has anything fun to say in the live chat.
I don't want to jinx anything. Dark Knight actually agreed with part of what I said, so I'm not gonna.
Yes, it's been a crazy week. It happened. For those of you that haven't seen it, go check it out. Link in the description to Professor Bill's channel, Comic Book University, where we did a sort of three-way discussion on the last episode.
We had a three-way.
We did indeed.
Three reviewers for three Jokers, part 3. It was Harmony. So that was done on my channel. But anyway, I don't want to go back to the idea of like we're talking about street level heroes. So I only brought my stuff up to point out this is the Batman that I like. Again, I don't care about the other version. If you do, cool. But thought we were just here for about the street level stuff. So does anybody have more about street level Batman?
Well, the interesting thing about Batman is that it's like you would think that his idealism would be tempered by the fact that he faces the worst in humanity every day, every night, both sort of mentally, emotionally, physically. You know, I mean, his rogues are these twisted mirror images of humanity. Right. I mean, and you could go into a number of different ways. Obviously, the Joker's meant to represent that in a much more holistic way. He is straight chaos for the sake of chaos and evil. And what I find interesting about Batman is that he's constantly faced with these physical embodiments of his idealism being antagonized and attacked, but he still finds ways to use his idealism to overcome those obstacles. And that's one of the things that I find most interesting about him and his space, and and why I think he's so prevalent for this conversation, because although, you know, the means that he is willing to go to in order to accomplish his end are a little bit more tempered by the fact that he's a street level hero, his idealism is so sort of, I don't want to say absolute, but it contains within it so much fortitude that he literally uses his idealism to beat back all of these, all of the antithesis and all of the sort of rationale as to why he has that idealism. Let's see. I forgot. I saw a comment that I thought was worth talking about, but it happened to pop out.
Got away from you.
Yeah, gotta love it. Huh. Oh, well.
So what's another character we could talk about? I saw Rorschach was brought up before.
Well, I think you could really sort of dissect a lot of the Watchmen characters. You know, they're all very much indicative of, I think, the most melancholy way to frame this conversation. They're all characters who have been psychologically and emotionally stunted to the nth degree by their how intimately sort of, I was going to say integrated, but the double I sounded really freaking bad in my head. But how integrated they are with humanity. I mean, they are constantly faced with the downfalls of humanity, and the way that they express themselves through heroism is entirely twisted by it, which is interesting. So you could specifically look at Rorschach, but I think pretty much the entirety of the Watchmen ensemble cast are exemplary of this conversation.
Samoki Dude always has great comments. Logical extreme. Remember, extremes go on both sides. So there's extreme on of a light switch, extreme off of a light switch, and then there's the dimmer, right? So there's always two extremes. There's not just one. Rorschach is basically Alan Moore's meme of Steve Ditko, who was probably the first true meme in comic books, right? He looked at his objectionism and said that this is ridiculous. It doesn't work. This is not what street level heroes are all about. He didn't like his ideals. He didn't like the idea that Spider-Man would protest against, or excuse me, would have a problem with students protesting against, a system that they paid money into, the university. He didn't like a lot of this stuff. But the way that he memed, the way that he memed him through Rorschach was something that was just so compelling to people. And it's funny, it's that it's a true meme when it gets away from the user. The user meant it to be as a joke, and then somebody else comes along and takes it and says, whoop, or everybody takes it and says, this is actually an incredible concept, For the most part, nobody cares that much about the original version of the question or the original version of Hawk and Dove, the original version of even the Creeper, who's actually a really fun character, but there's a reason why Ditko didn't stand those characters for too long, because he did have an extreme mentality for morals and whatnot. You are either good or you are bad. You are either right or you are wrong. There is no gray area. There is no dimmer switch, and F all that noise otherwise. And if you believe that there's gray area, that's just a proof that you're actually a bad guy. And Alan Moore making fun of that, it made it so that Rorschach actually took on a life of its own, where people are actually celebrating the idea of what Rorschach is. I mean, again, just the idea that the character would, say at the very end, in the face of this superpower and this decision, hey, we can live with this. We have to make a compromise. And him saying, no compromise, just kill me instead. Like, it's the most ridiculous concept ever. And I myself am sometimes curious how people can just go, wow, this is amazing. Like, really?
Well,
but
some Okie dude made the comment. He made the comment that DK just posted about Batman, Rorschach is Batman taken to the logical extreme. And that's very true. Because the fact of the matter is that
was the comment I was mentioning on, and I'm saying that logical extremes can actually go in two ways.
Yeah, no,
there's extreme hot, extreme cold. So
and that's what makes the street level characters so interesting, because we have those contradictions, because they can actually play both sides of the fence. Because in my view, Batman tries to suck and blow at the same time all the time. At the one hand, he'll show mercy to the Joker. He won't kill the Joker, even though he's more than justified for it. And he's more than legally justified for it multiple times. This is something that a lot of people I don't think appreciate. There's multiple times Batman, this nonsense that Batman has convinced himself that if he kills the Joker, it's somehow going to destroy his entire being, which quite frankly is nonsense. Because on the one hand, you got the other idea that Batman is relentless. Batman can't be defeated. Batman always finds a way, but apparently he can't find a way if he kills the Joker. Absolute nonsense. But for some reason, it adds intrigue to his character. Yet on the other hand, Batman, like, for example, in the pages of, I remember Greg Rucka's story, Batman and Wonder Woman in Hikeisha, or Hikeithia, I always maybe mispronounce it.
Hikatea?
Hikatea, thank you. In that storyline, Batman is absolutely insistent on bringing a woman who was a drug addict and who was abused by her drug trafficking boyfriend. She ended up killing him. Batman is insistent on bringing her to justice. It's like, really, Batman? You don't have anything better to do with your time? Really? That's, why don't you go deal with the Joker? But no, you got to interrupt Wonder Woman's life because of your moral rectitude. This is the, now this, it made for a compelling story, and that wonderful image of Wonder Woman putting her boot on Batman's face to the ground right on the cover. It makes for compelling stories, those contradictions, that some of your greatest virtues become your vices. And so Batman is a great street level character, but at the same time, there's no question that one of the reasons why I find Batman so fascinating is because he frustrates me. He frustrates me because I know that as much as I love Batman not taking any BS and kicking butt, it really frustrates me that he doesn't kill the Joker. I mean, it just really frustrates me. Batman shouldn't have a rogues gallery. You know what? Rorschach doesn't have a rogues gallery. Do you know why he doesn't have a rogues gallery? Because he kills them. They're dead. He doesn't have a rogues gallery. Why would you need a rogues gallery if you kill them all? And there's, but then of course that, Rorschach is a pretty screwed up guy where you could perhaps argue that there's some redemptive qualities in Bruce Wayne.
Punisher doesn't have much of a rogues gallery either.
This is true.
And there's one of the reasons why nobody really feels like talking about the Punisher. He's got a great costume. We did talk about for the guys in the, by the way, guys, the chat on the side is not the same as the comments section below. DKN wants to see it in the comments section below, the hashtag Daredevil giveaway with your favorite character. So if you could put that, would be easier for him to find than scrolling through hours worth of comments on the side. So
yeah,
down, not that side, please. No worries, brother. So here, I think that Rocky, you just inadvertently or otherwise touched on almost exactly what the street level is. Most recently, in a Daredevil comic, I think it was 2 or 3 Zardosky Daredevil comics ago. What do you call it? Stark showed up at one point and he repulsor blasted an entire truck full of weapons. And Daredevil looked on it and was like, you just destroyed police evidence. And this is very similar to your contradicting viewpoints, not your the contradicting cover, what it represents in the cover of Wonder Woman's boot on Batman's head. When you're sorry, my DC wall, when you're this, saying you are that golden eagle, you are like who's going to stop Wonder Woman? It's questionable if even Superman could stop Wonder Woman, but I don't know which of the 4 Batmans I should pull down from up here, but when you're Batman and you don't have the ability to just walk up and golden bracelet bounce things away and just boop and knock somebody out, you actually have to fight the bad guys. You also understand the human element, the idea of loss, and you understand the idea of street level. Eventually the cops are going to show up. When do we ever get to see the cops in a Wonder Woman or a Superman story? For the most part. But in the Batman comic books, his only real friend is a commissioner of the police department, you know what I'm saying? So he understands more. And just like with Daredevil looking at Iron Man could be like, yeah, I'll destroy this, this truckload of police evidence because I'm freaking Tony Stark. And what the hell are you going to do to me? But Daredevil looks at like Daredevil couldn't get away. And what an easy way it is for all of us to juxtaposition the same thing. What prevents us from putting on a mask and going out there? 1, we're not usually in as good a shape. 2, we know that the cops are going to be right there. Daredevil has to worry about, like Zardosky just showed, Detective North, getting into a fist fight with him at one point. Like, he made a mistake and he murdered somebody. Freaking Tony Stark has killed lots of people, sometimes quite on purpose, and he gets away with it. Because he's not street level. The very purpose of being street level is you have to answer to the law. Why does Batman not kill people? 1 is because he doesn't want to make it easy on himself. 2, to me, the most glaring reason that they never really point out in the comic books is, why should he? It's a broken system. He's obeying the law. He's going out there and doing pretty much what the cops are doing. Sometimes he gets in the way of the cops, but since he's always given at worst, he's not really breaking any laws. The laws are only enforceable if they're enforced. So when he goes out there, he captures somebody, brings them to Blackgate, or he brings them to Arkham. That's what you're supposed to do. If a cop kills somebody in the middle of the streets, hey, we have protests for that to this day. They would protest Batman too. It's not Batman's job to kill people. And plus, it would make him a really boring character, like the Punisher, who has a great costume and a crappy rogues gallery. How many times are they going to bring Jigsaw back from the dead? I mean, for the love of God already, And he's Batman. He's Batman.
And the thing can be said too is that, I mean, more so than him physically being a human, Batman's unapologetic and unwavering desire to not kill is his one of his core flaws. I mean, like, it's what allows him to continue motivating himself, because he's like, the job is never done. That's what drives him, right? Like, we had that really brilliant run of Detective Comics just before Detective 1000, where Batman's running this incredibly harsh simulation on himself, and Alfred's like, oh, the statistics, like the you are exponentially solving more crimes than are happening. We're down to like this single or this double digit amount of, lethal crimes a year compared to the triple or quadruple digits before you were ever Batman. And Bruce is like, it doesn't matter. Like, I keep going until there's absolute zero. And I think a part of that is that Bruce Wayne feels like he's perpetuating the crimes he's trying to stop. If he were a murderer, he's trying to prove to himself, just as much as he's trying to prove it to other people, that you don't have to be a murderer in order to, affect real change. And sure, Batman has taken the slow route, right? Like, he's walking an uphill battle in a way. Well, not in a way, he's definitely walking an uphill battle. But what's interesting about this conversation regarding the street level characters is that they're forced to reconsider how they're operating on their idealism based on their own circumstances. Bill said it well. Characters like Wonder Woman, like Superman, who are they going to answer to, right? Like, they obviously have this very elevated sense of morality, but at the end of the day, they're pretty much free to operate on it. And in a way, regarding why Batman is very much a counterpoint to that, is not only does he have to be cognizant of limiting factors, other things that can very much up the stakes for his crusade in a very human way, he is also very much trying to represent something, and he's trying to represent something that is infinitely more difficult by his limitations as a human being. So I guess I'm gonna have to go back to the norm and disagree with you, Boom. I gotta be with Bill on this side of the argument.
Oh, that's a diss and $1.
I feel more comfortable now. I feel more I feel more functional in dysfunction than I do in function, if that makes any sense, if that's functional. Anyways, I just it's coming on the 2-hour mark. I just want to make one final comment here. Listening, I did do some I did sort of do a little bit of research on this to sort of clarify my thoughts on this, and I've said what I basically wanted to say in substance. But I got to tell you, listening to your guys' comments, it reinforces to me, unfortunately, just how badly Wonder Woman and Superman have been written in the last decade. Because I really have to say and emphasize this enough, and I say this out of an inflated sense of self-importance of myself and the two of you. Let's at least be egocentric. I mean, because we're flawed people, right? Let's be flawed heroes, right? Who wants to be idealistic? So I say that, if any writer, God forbid, is listening, who's ever going to be writing Batman or Wonder Woman or Superman one day, I would say this: please take their virtues and exaggerate them and extend them to a natural consequence where it becomes a vice. It will make them more interesting. I would give them unhealthy habits. They shouldn't always be giving advice. They should be receiving it. They should be making more mistakes. I mean, Superman was raised in Kansas, for God's sakes. With all due respect to people raised in Kansas, I'm sure you're not perfect human beings now. I'm sure you have flaws as human beings. Don't tell me that some of those aren't reflected in Clark Kent. And because the people of Kansas, I'm sure, are wonderful people. I'm sure, and just like Clark Kent is Superman. I mean, so show us your flaws in all their glory. Show that in Superman and Wonder Woman. It will make the characters more relatable. That's what I want to see, because as much as I'm a DC lover, but I love Marvel characters. Stan Lee had it right. Flaws. People are attracted to flaws, and it's the insights that the flawed characters make into their own characters and their introspection that makes for a better story. And that's what I want to see.
Well said. Bill, any sort of closing statements on the discussion topic?
No, I'm good to go for longer. I'm good to stop it here.
All right. I guess if I'm just going to conclude myself in the context of the conversation, I think that a lot of these street level characters, and have sort of identified their idealism as a product or is influenced by their trauma. And I think that's what sort of drove me to have this to generate this topic of conversation, right? That a lot of the characters that we consider street level, the flawed characters that live by an ideal, but their ideal is manipulated by trauma, it makes us a little bit blind to a lot of these other street level characters that have these very pure sets of ideals, like Batman in a way, like Captain America. There's always going to be sort of mitigating circumstances or outliers, but what I think is really interesting in that the very sort of idea that we're taking these characters that began as caricatures, like Bill had so well said regarding how Steve Ditko introduced them. They were caricatures, they were archetypes. Now we're getting into these very sort of moral and idealistic complexities, and I think that's what drives us, or that's what intrigues us about these characters. That's what allows us to follow them and connect with them to a sort of much more, I don't really want to say mature, because I don't think that mature is the right way to categorize it, but it makes it a little bit more profound. So I'm really glad we sat down and had this conversation, because I think that it's very complex. And I'm sorry I've been word vomiting all night. I've definitely feel like I haven't been able to get a handle on what exactly I wanted to say, but it might just be this 5th cup of coffee I have with me here. So
coffee?
with all
Coffee? What do you mean?
What coffee? But with all that out of the way, I do want to thank very much everybody for joining us live and being a part of this conversation. And of course, my 2 co-hosts here for making the time of day. Bill, it's good to have you on. I know we don't get to do this very often, but it's always a pleasure.
Yeah.
And with that, is there what do the folks at home have to look forward to over on Comic Book University this week?
Reviews. I want to do more spotlights on stories, but like I am super busy with my intensive immigration and consultation courses. So CBU is kind of taking a backseat to that, unfortunately, but I'm still doing reviews.
Priorities happen, man. We totally get it. And make sure you guys go check it out. And if you want to see the 3 of us just being absolutely,
controlled chaos.
Controlled chaos. That is the perfect way to go about it. Again, go check out the 3 Jokers review we did this week on Professor Bill's channel. And then obviously big thanks to my usual partner in crime, ComicBoom, man. It's always a freaking pleasure to sit down and shit on each other all night. But with that, what do the folks at home have to look forward to over on the channel? I know you've been kind of busy yourself, but
I've been busy. I've lied multiple times in the last 2 weeks. I keep saying I'm going to be doing the video, and I never get around to it because I am really busy. But for what it's worth, I really do. I do have a new computer system. I'm still working on improving the Wi-Fi, and I do plan on bitching about Wonder Woman, and I got some themes I'm working on there, and I want to do a retrospective on death metal, because there's all kinds of things to sort of. Actually, a lot of it's similar themes that we're talking about. So I got stuff coming out in the next little bit, and those that are subscribed to me will know what's coming out. But expect Wonder Woman and death metal in the last little bit, and probably a rant and rave video.
Yeah, you guys definitely make sure you go check these 2 gentlemen out. Of course, the links are in the description down below to go subscribe to them. If you're not already, make sure you're subscribed here to Dark Knight Nation for my admittedly infrequent coverage of all things comic books. But you can always expect us, or at least for the foreseeable future, Thursday nights, live conversations, Let's Talk Comics, where we try to approach, for the most part, very evergreen discussions that I think that you can come back and look at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years later and still have it feel relevant. There are times where we cover more topical conversations regarding news in the industry, but we try to make sure it's something that somebody could listen to many years from now and still have it feel as fresh and relevant to them. And with that, all that out of the way, if you haven't already,
I do still do my podcast. I forgot. I do still do my podcasts. So I do a live stream every Saturday at 8.
I want to give you a compliment, Professor Bell, man. I love that your wife's on there now.
Oh, yeah.
she's holding you accountable for some of those outrageous views you have. It's good.
Right down you.
The thing is about let me. I got to ask you a question, Professor. I have to ask you this question. Do you find that you watch what you say with your wife being a partner on your podcast, or do you find it the opposite? How do you?
That's not who I am. No. Even though my wife is black, I still get into controversial subject matters with her where, you'd figure I'd be like, yeah, of course, and try and simp up to her. No, I argue with her and everything at some points. Like I said, we might be needing your, we're joking, but we might be needing your counseling at some point. Your joke to me was freaking hysterical. I showed her and she laughed her ass off. You look forward to representing her in divorce court, you bastard.
Yeah. I want to give a shout out to your podcast. Everyone listening in the stream here, I mean, check out Professor Bill's podcast. It's usually every Sunday, right?
Every Sunday morning. I try to get it up by 5, if not sooner. And then I show it on the YouTube channel on Tuesdays at midnight. But yeah,
right.
Subscribe to the podcast. That's where I'm really trying to push things lately. Thank you.
Definitely go check him out. Bill is, these compliments are aimed towards both these guys. These guys are honestly two of the best, I would say, commentators on anything comic book related. They have very unique perspectives. Both of them have been following the industry and the medium pretty much all their lives. And there's a reason why I like to have these guys on, because their perspectives are so unique and so founded in their own particular experiences. So if you're not already, please go check them out. Go subscribe to them on any particular platform. You can also follow them on Twitter. If you guys want to go back at any point, there's going to be a ticker like this one here, so you can go check them out. And I'm sure you'll see occasionally the shenanigans of the three of us on there as well. But with all that out of the way, we were just shy of hitting the like goal for the Daredevil giveaway. I will extend that until midnight tonight. So for those of you that want to make sure this is a valid, this is a giveaway that can happen, share the video with your friends, get them to watch it, get them to like and comment with their favorite street level hero, so that I can give somebody this comic book or this graphic novel, because it's
just got to get to 21 likes.
That's it, friends. But I've rambled on long enough. Thank you to everybody watching. Thank you so much to my partners in crime this evening. And this has been another great episode of Let's Talk Comics. We will see you guys next week.
Catch you later.